There's been some online chatter recently. I don't know. There's been some posts on threads that have come up in my feed that have got me a little bit agitated. And it's people criticizing record labels or the need for record labels today. And it's got me a little bit defensive. It's just kind of a passion of mine. And so I decided I'm going to write a book about it. And I did write a book about it. More on that in just a little bit. But today I want to address something very serious, very large, very big. And despite my frustration and defensiveness in seeing some of these posts online that call into question the need for record labels, the fact of the matter is the world doesn't actually need record labels. Let's discuss. Hello and welcome back to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running an independent record label. Today's episode is brought to you by LANDR. LANDR is one of the most well-known and respected digital distributors out there who come with a lot more than just digital distribution tools for your next release. They come with promotional tools and creative tools like sample packs, audio plugins, and mastering tools. To learn more about LANDR and to choose them as your distributor for your next release, go to LANDR.com. And if you go to LANDR.com/other record labels, you can get $50 off your annual subscription. Just click the link in the description of this episode or go to LANDR.com, that's spelled LANDR.com/other record labels. I mean, the truth is the world doesn't need record labels anymore. This is the hill I will die on. We really don't need record labels. I get that, but I'm going to counter that. And I think there's three things I hear people say as to why we don't need record labels. And I want to kind of go after those things. I think that people talk about the fact that artists can do everything themselves. People talk about the fact that we don't need record labels because there's no gatekeepers anymore in the music industry. And people say that we don't need record labels because artists are the ones who are making the art. So why do we need anybody else involved? I want to tackle those three questions today and those three criticisms today because I'm really passionate about record labels, if you haven't noticed. So much so that I have a new book coming out this month. It's called Why We Still Need Record Labels. It honestly is my life's thesis. It's something that I've been just kind of slowly building up over the past 8 years, running other record labels, starting as a podcast and now as a community and a home for resources for independent record labels and interviewing hundreds of independent record labels of all sizes all across the board. And I never started out to plan to do this. I don't consider myself an expert or anything. I'm just obsessed. And I was obsessed with whatever was on the spine of my records on CDs and whatever's on the back of what was this company name? What's this logo? And why is it that on all of the CDs in my collection that I love the most, there's this same logo? And that's where the obsession started. And now, 30 years later, from being a child and seeing all that, I still feel like there's a need for record labels, despite what some people are saying online. And I address those comments in the book. So the new books, just stay tuned. You can pre-order it now on Amazon, Why We Still Need Record Labels. And it really is kind of a love letter to the record labels that I've interviewed over the years and the ones that I think are doing something completely different than the traditional record label that the world, the music industry, and some of you may be familiar with. One of the things people say is that artists can do everything themselves. So we don't need record labels because artists can do everything themselves. The evolution of the home studio is something that's blown my mind because I was tracking with it since the early 2000s. Oh, that's a pun. I didn't realize that, tracking with it. I was obsessed with building a studio at home, mostly because I thought it looked cool. But for a long time, it was only like Prince and millionaires with studios at home. But then there was this all of a sudden slightly more powerful computers and sound cards. And in the early 2000s, Pro Tools made their software accessible without needing their super expensive hardware. I would say between 2000 and 2010, it went from no one had a home studio to maybe just nerds with a home studio. I was one of them. And then between like 2010 and 2020, it went from being music nerds having a home studio to everyone having a home studio. And quite frankly, I think most artists know that having a mic and a DAW and some sort of like cheap converter is pretty much essential to your music career these days. And then all of a sudden, these music nerds in their bedroom are teaching us all production techniques that no one could have imagined. They're doing things that we didn't think was possible without a console or outboard gear or proper studio monitors. And now they're winning Grammys. And at the same time, you can get a LANDR subscription. You can master and distribute your music worldwide in just a few minutes. And then you pair that with meta ads and smart links and Groover, a TikTok presence, and sending a few emails. And now artists are their own companies. The producer, the manager, the label, the publicist, all in one. So it really leaves no place for record labels. Counterpoint, a lot of artists don't want to do it all themselves. I think everything I just talked about, that evolution is awesome. It's continuing to change, and I think ultimately it's a wonderful thing. But it's wrong to think that every single singer-songwriter or indie band wants to self-manage their career. And I can tell you the majority have no idea what they're doing and really don't want to have any idea on how to do it. They feel yucky promoting themselves. They hate social media. They just want to write, perform, tour, record. Don't let any one tweet or post on Reddit make you think that all artists are independent and labels are useless. If I had to guess, I'd say that like 25% of artists are willing and capable of doing everything on their own, and they're killing it. But I strongly believe that the majority of artists want a teammate. Maybe they kill it at social media, but it's the distribution and sync stuff that they have no clue about, or merch, or physical media. Maybe they want no part of any of it. Teamwork makes dream work. I think the best labels that I've noticed are like band members. One girl plays the drums, one guy plays the guitar, and one person sends the emails. This is a big beef of mine when people talk about how artists don't need labels, how artists can just do everything on their own. A lot of artists don't want to. Just because they can doesn't mean they want to go after it and put in the hard work. Remember, these are people who have gotten good at their instrument, gotten good at singing, gotten good at songwriting, gotten good at recording at home, mixing, mastering. Some of them want to get good at releasing and promoting their own music, but a lot of them don't want to. They want somebody else who's gotten good at doing the next stage of releasing music. Here's another thing I hear people say. We don't need record labels because there's no gatekeepers anymore in the music industry. Let me give you an example of an old gatekeeper that I came across back when I was getting started in the early 2000s. I had first released an EP, or I was preparing to release an EP. Do you remember music magazines like American Songwriter or No Depression or Spin, like the traditional monthly magazines that would come out? There were some of them, like some of the more kind of elite ones that maybe would come out every other month. They were like a little bit more expensive. They would have album reviews in the back section, and they'd be independent releases. Some of them would be major label releases, but there'd be some unknown releases in there. And so my curiosity was, how do I get my album to be reviewed in the backs of these magazines, especially in a genre that's relatable to my music? And so some of them, and not all of them was the case, but I would find like there was a mailing address, and you would have to mail a physical CD to this location, and with a press pack, and then if you were selected, if they liked it, they would review it. And one of the stipulations was that it had, in order to be considered, and this was true for radio stations too, and even some college radio stations, in order for it to be considered, it had to be a glass master CD. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's a difference between a CDR that you put in your computer, if you still have a CD-ROM drive. I mean, most people don't. And that you would burn a CD and music would be on a burnt CD, as opposed to going to have a CD manufactured from a manufacturing plant with like a minimum of 500 or 1,000 copies. So a Glassmaster, one of the ways you could tell is if you looked at the bottom of any CD that a major label's released, it's like a perfect mirror, right? It's clear. Whereas a lot of CDRs, they were blue, they were green, they were just like a darker color. And so these magazines would kind of install this threshold that you sort of had to meet if you wanted your music to be considered to be featured in this magazine. And that was that it needed to be a Glassmaster, which, why would they say that? Well, I think it was a filter. What it meant was that if you had paid $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 to have 500 copies of your CD made or 1,000 copies of a real CD made, and that was the only option back then maybe your music is worthy to be considered. But if you're just like the average Joe and you've recorded something on a tape deck and then you've burnt it to CD somehow, and now you're just sending in this CDR with a Sharpie on top, they don't want that. They want something more professional. They can scan the cover and feature it in their magazine. This is like a perfect example of a gatekeeper, is the need for Glassmaster CDs. Not everybody did this, but I think about this often when I think about gatekeepers. And there were many more. I mean, radio stations were the same way oftentimes, where they wanted a certain kind of, even just the idea of sending a CD with a press kit. I think retail stores was the same way. I mean, you couldn't just bring a copy of your independently released CD to one of the record stores in the mall and say, can you put this on the shelf? It had to go through the head office. It had to go through their distributor. The distributor would only work with major labels or certain labels and certain distributors. It was incredibly arduous. And even if for some reason you got an independent distributor to carry your title, it still wouldn't be carried in the stores. It would just be something that customers could pre-order or order through the desk. I mean, honestly, these are examples of gatekeepers. There's millions more. So if almost everything is accessible, I mean, I say these things, it's laughable now. Almost everything, distribution, maybe not physical distribution, but certainly getting music to music fans, all of this is accessible to artists on their own. Then they don't need you to provide them with a key to whatever gate is locked by a gatekeeper. And this is true. So then what? Well, I take this reality as a challenge, and you should too. It should challenge you to find ways to offer your artists benefits that they can't get on their own. Or you offer it to them for free, like a literal company benefits. For example, back before unlimited uploads to digital distributors, my label got a deal with our distributor that we could have free releases, free barcodes, unlimited, because we did enough revenue that we were lifted into a higher customer service tier. So back then, that was a big deal. It meant that we could release singles and EPs and albums at no distro cost, something that would maybe cost the artist $60 to $70 on their own. And this was like novel at the time. This was like something that like elevated us as a record label above the artists. It was something that we could kind of offer them. We had a similar deal with our manufacturer. They were doing on-demand CDs for like $2 each, no minimum, but there was a $250 setup charge. But because we did so much business, we never had to pay that setup charge. Look, I think there are way more reasons and more serious reasons as to why labels are needed in the world, but sometimes it's just these tangible things that you're able to offer your artist or artists that you're courting to your label. You maybe have a great connection with a Japanese distributor or a close relationship with your local record store buyer or a sync agent or a friend at Spotify or a music supervisor friend. There's labels I know who I can tell that they have some sort of friendly connection with a Pitchfork writer or some other publication because that publication would always cover their releases. I'm like, okay, they got a direct line. Your company's assets begin to be your connections that you build over time. Now, it sounds like I'm instructing you to be a new generation of gatekeeping. No, not exactly. Think of it more this way. Your label mates, it's more like a co-op where you all co-own and share the expenses of things that might benefit the whole group, like mental health services. Perhaps you pay for coverage for the artists or a gym membership discount. We did it with an upright bass. My label did this with an upright bass. Seriously, back in the early 2010s, the Mumford & Sons era, you know, that banjos and folky bluegrass era, that was our niche. I loved it. I miss it, actually. We rented a big upright bass, you know, like the boom, 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 boom. You can clip that if you want. We rented one for a gig one night, and it got so much attention. It looked so cool on stage. And so we rented the same one again for other gigs and also for in the studio. So I decided that the label would buy this $1,000 bass and keep it in my studio, but any band on the label could come by and grab it and take it to a show or to a session. And we did that for a few years. And we ended up doing that with a PA system as well, as an amp and some mics, mic stands, and some speakers. So we had this, and now you could come and borrow it instead of having to go rent it yourself. This is one of the things that I feel like a great label is offering their artists something that they can't get on their own. They're not being a gatekeeper, but the fact of the matter is there's so much that is accessible to independent artists. And so what is it that your label is offering your artists that they can't get on their own? Spoiler alert, a lot of the time, it's just community. It's not necessarily something tangible. It's cool if it's tangible or if it's services or resources. But a lot of time, it's just community. I also hear people say, we don't need record labels because artists are the ones who make the art. So why should anybody else be involved if the artist is making the art? The art belongs to them. Well, this is half true in that the music does come from the artists. But I believe, and I'm biased here, but record label owners are creatives too. And this is something I'm really passionate about. And it's something I think a lot of record label owners don't recognize in themselves. They are creatives. You're a creative. They have created a sound, an aesthetic, a community, a brand. Or they're on their way to creating one or all of those. There are labels that we've had on this show that do this really explicitly well. I think of High Tide Recordings from New Jersey as the best example. They sell gorgeous merch. They run their vintage vibe, not only through the A&R and the sound of their records, but in their logo, in their merch, their album covers, and now they have a retail store too. Honestly, it's the dream position where the label's brand outshines any one release. Maybe the label's catalog, the label's aesthetic, the label's vibe, something is really the beacon, the North Star for their fans and for their artists. The new record label model that we're talking about, we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, is a model in which the founder of the label, you, are a curator and a creator. Your unique tastes or your unique combination of tastes. One of the things that I pride myself on as an artist and a producer is the fact that in my productions, in my tracks, I hear the influence of all my heroes who are oddly disconnected from each other for most folks. So that's like 80s pop of Phil Collins, and then the quirky electronics of Tom York, and then classical soundscapes of like Olafur Arnalds, and then like maybe lazy tempos of Wilco. Like these are my favorite artists and they're all disconnected. I love spa music. I love jazz, new age. I also grew up listening to 90s grunge. You have your own list of musical ingredients, right? Like your dad was a big band trumpet player and your mom forced you to take piano lessons and then your older brother got you into metal. Everyone's weird combination of influences create this entirely unique output. I don't think any two combinations are the same. And this should be true for your record label as well. As a creative, the combinations of influencers and or influences and passions and products and geographic regions and your ethics and real life things you care about, out comes something the world has never seen or heard before. And we talk about this in the new book. I'm so excited for you to check it out. We don't need record labels. Artists can release their own music. We don't need restaurants. People can cook their own food. We don't need record labels because fans can find music on their own. And we don't need quaint little bookstores. Readers can just use Amazon. Of course, the world is full of things we don't need, but we kind of do need them. I have this theory that as AI continues to spread, that human curation is going to make a comeback. That people will start to consciously and subconsciously rebel against algorithms or anything that is easy and impersonal. And that they'll start to seek out slower ways of living or enjoying life. And I think the communities that record label owners create with their label will be in a great position to offer people something real, something personal, something special. I suppose these online comments are right that today record labels don't make sense, but I feel like society is going to be drawn to things that don't make sense. Do you know anybody who prefers to walk over driving, or anyone who likes to go to the farmer's market instead of Walmart for groceries, or anyone who prefers vinyl over streaming? These things don't make sense, but that's what we kind of like about them. Thanks again to our friends at LANDR for sponsoring today's episode. Check them out by going to LANDR.com. That's LANDR.com. And if you go to LANDR.com/other record labels, the link is in the description of this episode, you can get $50 off your annual subscription, and you can benefit from all of the tools and digital distribution that LANDR provides. Thank you all for listening, and keep a lookout for the new book coming out soon, Why We Still Need Record Labels.